Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program here at Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore. I host the show each and every Sunday, and we speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. And again, the goal of the program, especially during the legislative session, which is still underway, things are going to change in some respects with a new law or a new regulation, perhaps. We'd like to make sure people are aware of that. And, of course, our show is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're already looking forward to the 179th Fair coming up August 12th through the 16th, 2025. Last week, or actually 2 weeks ago now, we had the opportunity to talk with a couple of the aldermen. We had Larry Copley and Bill Gillum in to speak with us for about an hour with their thoughts, not just on the recently concluded town meeting election, but also any issues and ballot items going forward for the city of Rutland. And today, even though it's a couple weeks after the election, we have our mayor, Mike Doenges, has joined us. And so the first thing I want to say is congratulations, Michael, because I haven't had a chance to tell you that. I did mention it that day on the air, but you weren't here. So,
well, thank you very much, Brian.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
You are now going to be a second-term mayor. And we have... at the time, I'm trying to recall, we were recording that show before the committee assignments were made. So I still don't know, because I haven't been able to keep track of it, which committees Gillum went on and which ones Copley went on. I know Larry wanted to be on the finance committee. I don't know if that happened or not, but that was all, of course, coming up. Actually, it was on St. Patrick's Day, if I'm remembering correctly, that the board met and elected a new board president. Tom Donahue is now the new board president.
It's Dave Allaire.
Dave Allaire.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Right.
And Dave Allaire is now the new board president. We are still waiting on committee assignments, which I'm sure he'll have shortly.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So, anyway, you were reelected. The complexion of the board changed a little bit, I think it's fair to say, with three incumbent members of the city council not being reelected. And so... they're very familiar faces, I think, to a lot of people in the city, those that did get elected. Lots of public service experience there, and hopefully the administration and the city council can work together to make our city even better.
Yeah, that's absolutely the goal. You know, it's interesting. The experience that's on the board now is robust, and that's great. I think, I was happy to get reelected. It was a decent margin. I was very pleased with that, and it was very interesting to see the board that is back, so to speak, and it is back because every single one of those people that were reelected has been on the board at least at one point in time. So it's good to see. I think we'll have a lot that we can work on together, and I'm looking forward to the next year.
And speaking of ballot items, let's go over those. And there's, I think, 4 of them that we can talk about. And then the other issues that we always seem to be talking about, the housing situation and the homeless situation and all that stuff.
Sure.
Some of that intersects with stuff coming out of Montpelier. Some of it doesn't. We're hoping, at least I am, for some continued reform to Act 250. It won't affect Rutland City because it's a Tier 1 community now, and the downtown project can go ahead, hopefully. I don't know whether VEPSI's blessed it yet or not. I know they were down, but they may still be.
So VEPSI came down for their review, and then they have a follow-up meeting. We're waiting to hear the results, but we should know soon whether they've blessed it or not. And it was a really good meeting with VEPSI, by the way. They came down, they asked a ton of questions, they put some really hard questions before the panel, and I think they were pretty happy with the results, but we'll see when they give us their feedback.
Okay. So I know there was a bond item, and that, I assume, passed along with it was strange. I don't want to keep dominating the discussion here, but all the school board budgets, except for, I think, 2 in the county, Mount Holly's failed by, I think, a single vote, maybe 2 votes.
That's what I heard.
And then the Fairhaven School District also did not get their school budget approved. But everything else went through, and so I assume a lot of the budget items went through as well. And you know better than I about the bond, the purchasing limits, and all of that.
Yeah, so the city budget the city budget passed overwhelmingly, and I think that's a lot to do with the fact that we were under a 3% increase over the previous year, and we took the call for affordability very, very seriously, and we pushed. I very specifically pushed the board to make some tough choices and really trim. While inflation continues to rise and we still see the costs of what we have to deal with going up, we had to make some tough choices. So that worked well. But the bond passed as well. So now the bond is for our capital improvement projects, and there's one of them that we already specified and designated, and it is the refrigeration, the chiller system for the Giorgetti rink. The one we have is over 50 years old. It uses ammonia, which at hockey rinks, you don't necessarily want ammonia gas out. So it's an older system that's that will be replaced this season. And with that, we'll see the longevity of that rink go on for a long period of time. But that leaves some remaining funds. And for those who've been keeping track, the Board of Aldermen approved a capital improvement plan at the end of the year, just sometime in early January, actually. And that plan has other things that need to happen within the city. So whether it's repairing the fire escape at the fire department or fixing units at the police department, there are certain things that we need to invest in, but we don't want to use property tax dollars to do it. So the city has, much like Rutland Town has, a 1% sales tax, and the funds from that sales tax will go to pay that bond and help us get some of these bigger projects done. Okay.
Equipment replacement included in the bond, or is that a separate
No,
issue?
That's separate. So the equipment replacement issue, we had two equipment replacement line items. One was specifically for fire, if I remember correctly, and the other one was shared between rec, DPW, and the police department. And the one that was shared, the resources were very tight because police vehicles have been getting more and more expensive. You used to be able to buy a fully loaded police vehicle for $23,000. So the numbers that we had in there made sense. Now you can't get one for less than $75,000. Wow. And that's even if we look at, so we look at, being very efficient on what equipment we put in there, making sure that we reuse as many things as possible from previous vehicles. But at the end of the day, it's still really expensive no matter which way we slice it. So what we did is we increased the fire department one a little bit. We created a separate one for police, and then we left the third fund, the one that used to be shared between police, rec, and DPW. That third fund is now just shared with rec and DPW, so they have a little bit more that they can use for their equipment that gets more expensive. The lawnmowers that we use that need to last, they're $30,000. They're not the $2,000 lawnmower you get at Home Depot. So those types of things are going to be properly allocated in the budget, but it does affect the tax rate. So next year when we sit down to do our budget, we have to take into account those increased costs and find other areas to cut.
Okay. And both of those passed?
And then we had a couple of others. One was a purchasing limit. So the purchasing limit is simply if department heads, people who are responsible for their own budgets, want to buy something, and it goes above this limit, they have to bring it to what's called the Board of Finance, which is the board president, the city treasurer, and the mayor. And that Board of Finance can then make a decision, and certain amounts have to go out to bid, or we can say that it's sole source because there's only one place to get it from. That decision is usually made at that Board of Finance. But really that limit, what used to be a $3,000 limit, that was in our charter. And that $3,000 limit was set years ago when things cost a lot less. So what we did is we said, rather than use this limit, let's allow the city's policy to set the limit, and then we would change the limit in the policy with a vote by the Board of Aldermen. It makes it much more flexible. Most municipalities, even like Hartford or in Norwich, they're up in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. We've been at $3,000 for so long that we'll probably start that limit at $10,000 just to make sure that we're continuing to control costs and things aren't getting out of control. But we have great department heads in place to manage their budgets. So I think what you'll find is that even with that change, they'll still be very responsible with their spending.
Yeah. It's funny. I share your view of putting a number in a statute, because as soon as you freeze it and inflation continues to go, or
That's right.
however you want to look at it, you have to go back and change the number. So I think it does give communities more flexibility. If it, I don't want to say it's more vague, but it's less stringent and less prescriptive to do something that way. And you've got a group of people that are overseeing it that can say, no, that's too much, or yeah, okay, let's do it.
That's right.
But you wouldn't have to necessarily pass a new ordinance or a budget in order to do that. So that, I think, makes some sense. Was there something about fines as well?
Yeah, so this is another thing that's in statute. So for those who don't know, our city charter is actually state statute, which means that any time we want to change anything in it, it has to go to the legislature.
Right.
Where in other states, that's not necessarily the case. So there's another piece in statute. It's another number that's assigned, and it's our maximum fine. So if you're parked in a handicap spot, or if you spray paint over a city property or something like that, those fines, there's a cap that's set in our charter. What we wanted to do is remove that cap and reference the state maximums. So as the state of Vermont says, hey, we're gonna raise the maximum fine for what municipalities can charge for ordinance violations, ours will automatically go up. And that gives us the flexibility to stay within the guidelines of the state. And again, it's a maximum fine, meaning we will obviously, charge less, for parking tickets and certain things like that than the maximum. But it does allow that to change without the state changes theirs, and then we have to submit a charter change, which takes a long period of time. So it really just allows us to follow the state a little bit better.
Yeah, for those of you that may be aware, we're what's called a Dillon's Rule state. I don't know where, if I looked it up, I could tell you. I don't know. I know it wasn't Bob Dylan, okay? Yeah. And so what it means is that a municipality basically is hamstrung to the point where they can't do too much without legislative approval. And unfortunately, it does require a charter change. It starts, guess where, in the House Government Operations Committee, and then moves across to the Senate, where I'm in. And normally, unless there's some controversial issue, it gets passed, but it does take some time. We do have one coming out, I think, next week. Burlington, the city of Burlington, has passed a new charter that will include the prohibition of guns in bars. And I know that's going to be problematic for the governor, who has made it clear that it's not a good idea with something as controversial as that to have one community do it one way and maybe 100 other ones do it a different way, so that if you're literally driving through somewhere, you could be in violation of the law and you'll not even know it, rather than have just a standard law or statute about it. So anyway, that's just an example. But yeah, we did, the local options tax was one that we did allow municipalities to enact without going through the charter change. So anytime a municipality does want to institute that, and it's usually 1%, in fact, it may only be 1%.
Right.
They can do it without the blessing of the General Assembly. Which
in the city of Rutland, before the legislature changed that, we went through the full process. So we brought it to the legislature. They allowed us to change it, and then the next year they said, well, any municipality can opt. So that's fine. We didn't mind doing the extra work because the citizens this is something they really wanted. They wanted to see part of the burden, the responsibility of running government fall to those who come and spend time here and spend their dollars here.
Yeah. And we're going through a whole bunch of stuff in the transportation fund now where people are driving gas-powered vehicles less, so the gas tax is less, and the transportation fund is smaller as a result, and that goes up to pay for paving our interstates and state roads or bridges or whatever. So it's in a hole right now, a pretty incredible millions of dollars hole, and we're still trying to figure out how to help the situation by having those that use electric vehicles to somehow contribute to that fund, but we haven't come up with the perfect solution yet, whether you upon registration pay a fee or whether somehow mileage is figured in. We don't have a perfect situation yet. But I know both transportation committees are working on that. But the T fund, the so-called T fund, the transportation fund, is millions and millions of dollars in the hole. And it's to the point where I think in a normal year, somewhere around 280 to 300 miles of road gets repaved. There's this big, huge white book with every road listed and where, in what order they're going to do it. Well, because of the deficit, we're down to about 120 miles that will be done this summer. So it gets really touchy. And, of course, everybody wants their road paved.
Well, that's true. And, as you said, electric vehicles are using the same road that gas tax normally paid for.
Right.
I've seen other states look at taxing the charging stations or, when you pay for that or, a surcharge on the electric bill if you have an EV. There's no good way to do it yet. And I think everybody's trying to figure this out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so those are some of the ballot items that were up for town meeting and all approved, including the city's municipal budget and the school budget. So that, I think, is a sense of relief for a lot of folks who sit on school boards. And speaking of education, this was probably the biggest issue in the November election of 2024 because it has a direct impact on property taxes for people, which went up, and people were not happy. And many who lost their seats did so whether it was a direct result or indirect result of people feeling that they were responsible somehow for continuing to increase property taxes. So when we convened in January, on our side, the Senate Pro Tem said, look, this is a big issue. Mm-hmm. We want to work on this. So for the first 2 or 3 weeks, the committees are asked not to do anything else in terms of bills. Don't take up any other bills. All we want you to do is start working on this educational system, whether you're talking about a change in governance or funding or maximum class sizes or school choice, whatever issue you want to take up. Unfortunately, it really hasn't changed much in that intervening, I guess it's been, 8 weeks, 10 weeks now, something like that. We just went through the so-called crossover dates, and that's about a halfway point. The Senate Education Committee has come up with at least a plan for the districts, the number of districts. The governor has proposed 5 statewide. We're in the hundreds and something in districts right now, including the supervisory unions. And I think it was offered as a proposal, knowing it wouldn't. There's no way that would happen this year. The Senate version has 9 districts, and unfortunately, the House Education, and I'll just, if I'm picking on the chair there, Peter Conlon, I guess I am. They have decided, when all is said and done, they want a study done. So they're not ready to move ahead with any sort of plan on the House side. So I'll give credit to Senator Seth Bongartz from Bennington. Mm-hmm. He's the chair of the Senate Education Committee, and that committee has been working hard to come up with a correct number of districts. And then inside those districts, there'll be what is going to be called wards, how many of those, and then how we structure it. The supervisory unions each have superintendents, and that will probably shrink some jobs. There'll be fewer superintendents if this all comes to pass. The formulation or the foundation formula, I believe, was set at $13,200 per student to educate them year by year. And it's all over the place now. There's some communities that spend $10,000 a year or less, and there's some that are spending $25,000 per student. So somewhere there's got to be a number that works for everybody. And then if a community wants to spend more than that, they want to add a playground, they want to put a pool in or whatever it is, they will pay for that increase themselves and not the rest of the state. So, for instance, Burlington High School, they've just built what I consider as a Taj Mahal of a high school, and everybody in the state had to pitch in and help. It wasn't just residents of Burlington using that facility. So anyway, I'm very disappointed that we haven't progressed further along than we have. We don't even have the districts in place yet. So there's talk now about the session going at least into June, and then some of the committees working through that month even. We knew it was going to be a 2, 3, even a 4-year process, but at least if we could get the governance done this year, it would be a step in the right direction. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that.
It's such a heavy lift.
It is.
We know what it is just to run Rutland City Public Schools, and we know what that looks like and how hard that administration has to work every day just to keep that going. So I can't imagine how difficult this is for legislators to be up there trying to figure out what's best. I'm sure they're being well advised. I'm sure the Department of Education is doing a phenomenal job. It was nice to see the appointment confirmed.
Yes,
that was a big deal.
Yep.
And you know what we're hearing down here, and I don't know where you guys are at, but 12 districts is what it sounds like right now. That came from, I think, the governor's video the other day he had on his Facebook page. But whatever happens, for me in the city, and when we talk to our people on the school board, they're willing to work with whatever the situation is. I think that's key. One of the things the governor said is, and I think I just saw it this morning, so I'll try to get this as close as I can, is we have one of the highest cost per pupil in the country.
We do.
And we do not have the test scores that equate to that, meaning we're not getting the results for the dollar invested. And I know it's not always a one-for-one, especially with humans, right? Like, we're interesting people. Everybody's got their own personality. But if we're going to invest that kind of, I think the statement is we're going to invest that kind of money, we should see the results. And I think that there are great administrators and great teachers out there that are doing amazing jobs. And if we can realign these resources right, we may be able to see improvement. And that's, I think, the goal, right? So.
Yeah. The other aspect of that, unfortunately, is the estimates going forward for enrollment in the K through 12 system continues to decline. So, for instance, I think it was maybe 28, 30 years ago, we had up to maybe 110, 112,000 students, full-time students from K through 12 statewide. Right now, we have 88,000. So it's decreased substantially. And the estimate now that I saw, by the year 2030, we will have 77,000 students. So, that's I can't do the math that quickly, 25, 35% decline in the number of students in our K through 12 system. And so there are buildings that we have for our high schools that aren't being used the way they were when, the enrollment was up. And so we've got to address that. And you're right, Mayor Doenges, we have fewer students. It costs more to educate them, and yet the scores that are being touted, we're not terrible. We're not the worst in the country. We're somewhere in the middle. But unfortunately, they're not going up. They're sort of remaining flat from what I understand. So it's kind of like not a good business model where if you're a customer, you're spending more money to buy the product, but not getting the right product.
Sure. And then Representative Harrison also is heavily focused on the CTEs, which are the technical education. So like the staff, and for Rutland, that's Stafford Technical Center.
Yep.
And those from this, I know they're being considered in the process and how important they are. We see more and more students wanting to enroll in those areas. There's a major skills gap in the entire country, let alone just Vermont. But there's this huge skills gap, and the CTEs are going to be more and more important over the next few years. So with this change and with the shuffling around, maybe there's some advantage to take care of those needs with the facility shifts and the consolidations.
Yeah,
and what happens?
I do think it makes a lot of sense to align our districts with the CTEs. I think there are 12 or 13 in the state. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I
know there's one county that has more or has fewer. In other words, there's 14 counties. I don't think every county has their own. Hannaford to our north in Middlebury is a tech center. Stafford, I don't remember where all the other ones are. But, because you've got busing already in place for those outlying towns. There's a lot of advantages to align it that way. But, again, that's for the Education Committee to come up with a solution. And, by the way, you have, and I'm not referring to Mike Doenges, but you being the listeners, you have two Rutland County senators that sit on that education committee in the Senate. Senator Dave Weeks, who I believe is the vice chair of that committee, and Senator Terry Williams from the Poultney area. So get a hold of those folks if you want, and if you have suggestions or thoughts, I know they'd be happy to receive that. And it's a big project. So for some reason, it's dropped off the got to get it done this year list, and unfortunately, now we're starting to see some other bills that, we don't necessarily have to get passed this year. We did get by crossover this past week. Well, when you hear this show, it'll be 2 weeks ago. The money committees had to have their work finished. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't put provisions of a bill that so far has not passed inside something else that did. And that's, the end of the session gamesmanship that goes on every single year. So we'll see what happens. Okay, we're talking to Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, recently reelected to his second term. We will take our first break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, your weekly host of the Public Affairs program here at Catamount Radio. Our guest today is Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, and our show, of course, brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. We're looking forward to the 179th Fair coming up August 12th through the 16th, and we're desperately also trying to, by the way, grandfather the fair in that 3-acre rule requirement. So far, we haven't been successful, but we're not going to give up. The Senate Agriculture Committee is working hard to make sure, because if that goes through, and if in fact they have to do what was originally, well, I don't want to say it's originally, because the fairs were never expected to be included in this. I think that's pretty clear from all the testimony I heard. Somehow, as is true all too often, they got captured in this law that they weren't originally intended to have to follow. But anyway, if they do, the fairs will go out of business. There's no two ways around it. They just don't have the money. And we're talking, in Rutland's case, $3-4 million to get this thing done. So hopefully, I mention that every time I say brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, because I want people to know, and I want people to keep pressure on the legislature to get rid of that 3-acre rule as it has to do with the fairs. So Mike and I were talking a minute ago about how, at least I feel, if we could align our educational districts with the so-called career technical education districts, like Stafford Tech, for instance, in Rutland, it would be a great idea. And in fact, we had Lyle Jepson from Cedar on, it's probably a month now. We began to talk about this expo that's coming up. So I'll just give a little bit of kudos to Cedar folks for coming up with this idea. It's actually presented by FW Web Company. Bring Back the Trades Skills Expo. And this will take place on May 20th at Castleton, Vermont State University at Castleton, to be politically correct. I still call it Castleton University. Forgive me. It's an all-day event, 9 to 3, and this is something that they're going to invite, if I remember correctly, 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, and then, of course, all the high school grades to come over and find out what is available for them in terms of careers. High skill, high demand, and therefore high paying careers. Supply and demand. If you're the only, pick a topic, I don't know, if you're only electrician in town, and sometimes it feels like there's very few of them, you can demand whatever you want for your price and be pretty well assured you're going to get it. So we're hoping that we bring a whole bunch of kids over there. There are scholarship giveaways, internships available as well. And it's just a great idea, and sponsored again by FW Web Company. But again, I think the force of this was put together by the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region. So I'm hoping a lot of people head over to Vermont State University at Castleton on the 20th of May, and 9 to 3 is the deal. And you'll learn about. I wish I had. I hate to say stuff that come to me off the top of my head because I usually get in trouble, but I'm not sure there's a great demand for philosophy majors in this day and age.
Were you a philosophy major?
No. I was sociology, anthropology, which had absolutely nothing to do with what I did as a career at this radio station for near 50 years. Not that it was a waste of time or money, but I'm just saying when I was, and I'm much younger than you are, Michael, the so-called tech jobs weren't, that well looked upon. The shop class was sort of where you went if you weren't college bound, and unfortunately, I think all too often that's still the way some people feel, and it's really held us back. It really has.
Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, for those who remember, he has this Mike Rowe Works, and the entire mission of the program is to say, listen, there are absolutely some people that need to go to college. If you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, you want to run the CEO of a major corporation, college is a great way to go.
Yep.
But there are so many, you said it, high-paying, high-skilled jobs out there that are so important, and we can't forego that. And sometimes college isn't necessarily the best way to go. There are people that do both and end up better for it. But Rutland City is actually going to be at this event, so we're going to have a booth there.
Yep.
We have positions all the time opening up. People are retiring. It's actually why the skilled trades are in such high demand, is because there's so many people retiring out of them at this point. So we are looking at wastewater treatment plant, water treatment, loader operators, DPW workers, everything across the board in the city. And those are just some examples. And I'll tell you, it's an amazing thing to see this happening in our community, because we have such a demand even here. So,
and the governor's been very clear since he was elected, probably first term as lieutenant governor, that our workforce is aging. We don't have enough folks in that sort of sweet spot, 25, 54-year-old category. Those are your high earning years. So we're desperately looking for, folks electricians, plumbers, carpenters, all that kind of stuff. And then, as you say, Mike, even more specific things. I had Peg Bolgioni on the show last week, and she talked a lot about in the healthcare field, there are jobs available that people may not necessarily aspire to, but a lot of times it's because they don't know they're available. So, hopefully this Skills Expo will turn out very well. So, I wanted to bring something else up, which has been in the news. It's been controversial, I guess, to some people. The Recreation Department Director. Where are we with that?
So, Rutland Parks and Rec is beloved by the community, and Kim Peters has been the director for some time now. She's been with the department for 7.5 years, and when she was appointed by Dave Allaire to run the rec, she started taking it in a new direction, and it has grown significantly. It's doing a phenomenal job. The reach to families and kids has been wonderful. And one of the things I did want to talk about is the fact that we don't want to change that direction, right? I put out, the way I wanted to do it is to have a discussion with the department first and then put out the messaging, but the way things work is once one person knows, everybody knows in Rutland. That's totally fine. But once I had told Kim that I didn't want to reappoint her to the position, we'll get to that in a second. I wanted to make sure that I talked to the department first, and then I told the community I don't want to change the direction of Rutland Recreation. I think it's doing a great job serving the community. I want to continue with the mission and the values that it has today. I want to continue all the programs that people know and love, and the staff that is there has done such a phenomenal job. I want to highlight the fact that they're doing great work, and because they've done that for so long, we'll be able to keep the rec running and keep doing the things that we've been doing for so long. There are a few things I'd like to see us double down on, for sure. I'd like to see us double down on what I consider the most vulnerable population in our community, which is our youth, right? Rutland's youth need as many opportunities as they can to get connected to the community. And the rec has done a great job, but I think there's always room for growth in every area, and that's a big one. We have an aging population too, and we just talked about that. And that population heavily uses the rec now, and I'd like to see more investment in those areas. So really focus on those two things. And then the third point, so keep doing what we're doing, grow in those two areas. And the third point is our the facilities and maintenance part of the rec team have all the right skills to really work on city properties and city facilities, and they do a good job, but we don't take as much time to and invest in the facilities part as I think we do in the parks part, and I think there's some balance there that we could work on. All of that is a longer term rollout. There's nothing that's going to change right now. We've got to work towards that, and that's going to take an appointment of a new superintendent and moving forward. And now, to go back to the choice and the decision, I think it's really important for people to know that I appreciate exactly how this community feels about its current director. And Kim's history there has been that she is well teamed with our partners. She takes personal investment in people and the connections that we have to other organizations in the community. And that value I want to stay. I don't want to see that go away. As mayor, I do have the choice to appoint my team, and I have to appoint people that I can work with, that I can truly trust, that I know have the best interest of the city at heart. And when making these decisions, even though I knew it would be a very unpopular decision, this is something I thought seriously about for a long time, and I had to make this choice. And we'll be announcing appointments in the future. There's a process for that goes to the Board of Aldermen. They deserve to know first before I announce things in public. But I knew that the community would support Kim and feel for her for not being able to continue in this position. I have heard that loud and clear. I'm not taking that lightly. But the decision that I made was for the benefit of the city as a whole, and I think people will see that as we move forward.
So it was something that you did think about well before the election.
Yeah, it was on my mind. It was something that I had to think about and process, and I had the tough choice to make. And then, I'll have to make other appointments as well. But I thought I thought about it long and hard. It wasn't a quick decision. It wasn't willy-nilly. And I know that's out there, and that's not the case at all. This has been something that I've been processing, and I do this with all my department heads. Are you in the right place to move forward to the next step? In this particular case, I need to go in a different direction with leadership. And
I assume that you've already spoken with someone who has indicated an interest and availability to take over.
So I have lightly spoken with someone. I had someone in mind. They aren't necessarily gung-ho for the position, and so there'll be a continued discussion. But yeah, there's going to be a change, and my hope is to make it as smooth as possible. I know there might be some hiccups along the way because we are down essentially a staff member, but we will do our best to keep the rec open as open and available as it has been for our community.
Okay, I thought I'd ask because I know a lot of people are talking about it, and unfortunately, our social media system, platform, whatever, is such that if you spend too much time reading it every day, you get maybe a little bit of I don't want to say a false impression, but an impression that something is way, way, way crazier than in reality it might be. And I'm not trying to defend your decision or her or Kim's position either. I just... And in total transparency, Brian, I've gotten a ton of emails and a ton of phone calls supporting Kim, asking me to reconsider my decision. And that's a tough process. You make the decision. Good leaders across the board, they'll all tell you the same thing. You make the decision with the information you have, and that's the best decision you can make. And that's sometimes tough for people to take, especially when they don't have all the information. We're talking with Rutland Mayor Mike Doenges on Catamount Community Connection. So let's move to anything else you want to bring up that, we've talked a little bit in past shows about the TIF district, the ongoing hotel project, if you will, with the Beldens. And again, my hat is off to the whole Belden family because they're all involved at some level. This is a risk for them. This is something where a lot of people wouldn't want to do that, kind of put all their resources in one basket, so to speak, and hopefully see this through to fruition. The good news about the VEPSI board is I think we do have some local folks on that. So I think that I don't want to say we're going to have the inside track there, because you mentioned when they did their visit, they did come up with some good questions, but that to me is our next big project. And then right across the street from that, the old Richardson building is where the Paramount has begun some major renovation work to make that facility a much larger one. So those are all good things, I think.
They're all amazing things happening kind of all at the same time. just to quickly comment, although we have local folks on the VEPSI board, they can't actually vote. They have to recuse themselves because there's a potential that they could benefit. So
I didn't know that.
So, which is but that's great to know that they're taking themselves out of the process. But the investment that's happening, like you said, the Richardson building, the Paramount is putting the work in, the Beldens, you called it's a passion project, Brian. This is something they want to do for the community. They didn't have to do this. There are plenty of things I'm sure they could invest their money in that are more guaranteed, that have a better margin on the outcome side. But this is a family that cares about this community making a choice to put their dollars back into that community, to the point that they're putting so much on the line, just cleaning up that site before the TIF district, before the hotel gets built. They're going to be cleaning up that site. And if for some reason the hotel doesn't work out, at least we'll have a clean site for what's next. So lots of investment there. We had a rash of permits come in for new buildings, 2 new 4-unit buildings, a bunch of renovations, bringing apartments online in a couple of other areas. I know there's one landlord who built some higher end apartments, and they were curious as to if they'd be able to rent them out for higher rent rates to people that can afford them. And so far, they're seeing success with that. So the investments that people are making in the community right now are seeing positive results. They're seeing essentially returns already, and I think that's reflected in the fact that we're seeing growth and more people investing too. And that's what we want. We need to move that economic football forward, so to speak, and I think that's what we're doing right now. Yeah,
as far as I know, the state will redo their improvement program, try to help people out who have properties that are not up to speed yet, and make substantial kinds of financial assistance available if they want to rehab an apartment building or a house or whatever. That seems to have really worked, and I like it when we actually do something in Montpelier that works.
Yeah, the governor's been heavy on Vermont Housing Improvement Program, and it has worked well in Rutland too. We have seen direct benefit from that program. They're essentially grants. They're like forgivable loans, I think, is how they actually work out paperwork wise. Right. But the idea is $30,000 to take older offline units and bring them online. And there's a developer in town. His name is Stephen Box. I don't know if you've ever heard him on, but Stephen does an incredible job. And his mantra is to bring these 240 offline units back online. And I don't disagree with him at all. It takes less time to turn these around. It's less expensive to turn these around, while the affordable housing entities like Cornerstone, which is what used to be known as the Rutland County Housing Trust, they are doing 30 units down on 4th Street. That's great, but that's going to take a long time to build. It's an expensive project because there's federal regulation and how it goes. Whereas landlords who have those resources from VHIP can take an offline unit and have it back online in 30 to 60 days. That's a huge win for the community when those programs work.
I love driving by West Rutland now because you can see that 3-story, I think it's 3, it might even be 4. Yeah. It's a big building sitting where I think it was a store at one point. I can't remember. It was like the small local store that everybody would go in. Anyway, it's gone up, and I don't know how soon it's going to be open, but that's also something I think Mary Cohen's group was involved with, and that's going to provide housing for folks. And I think it's an exciting time for not just Rutland City, but West Rutland in this case, and some of the other outlying towns. We do have to take our second break. When we come back, I want to talk about perhaps how the governor's veto of a bill, and again, by the time you hear this, it may either be sustained. I don't think it's going to be overridden. I can almost promise you that. But it could be sustained, or there could be some additional negotiations that would have taken place to make that not necessary. But anyway, we're talking to Rutland Mayor Mike Doenges. Let's take our second break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. And today we're talking with recently re-elected mayor of the city, Mike Doenges. I mentioned right before we took our break, I think it's H-141. I'm not really great with remembering numbers of bills, but it's the so-called Budget Adjustment Act, which is normally fairly straightforward. It's just a truing up of that current year's fiscal budget with what agencies have spent up until that point. Sometimes they've overspent, and you got to move money from another one into that to make it all come out evenly. It is not designed for additional spending. That's what the big bill, the so-called big bill or budget is, which is coming up at the end of the session. But one of the things that came up this year, which was included in the Budget Adjustment Act, was, again, a $1.8 million appropriation to continue the so-called hotel-motel program into June. Right now it ends on April 1st, or technically I think it's March 31st, whatever, or is it March 30? I don't know if we have 31 or 30 days in March. Whenever it ends. And so there will be people that won't have a place to stay at that point. And that, along with the $14 million that the state treasurer had in his budget, and that some of the folks in the legislature wanted to spend on other projects, were two reasons why the governor vetoed the bill. So, as it stands now, since it is an H or a House bill, and all the money bills have to start in the lower chamber, they have the first vote on it. It has been scheduled at least 3 or 4 legislative days, but keeps being put off. And I'm hoping that might be a signal that there's continuing negotiations between the administration and those that feel differently. I'm supporting the governor on this. I made it pretty clear when I voted no on the bill that I would be not voting for it. And there's, I think, the same sort of reasons involved for me. So it has not been taken up for consideration yet in terms of a veto. In the House, I believe there are now 56 or 57 Republicans, and it unfortunately is probably going to be along party lines. And 51 votes are needed to sustain the veto. In other words, we agree with you, Governor, and the bill is dead. So if they're all 56 or 57 agree, it would be sustained, and then the Budget Adjustment Act would fail. I did have a direct discussion with the governor about a week ago, and even though it would be inconvenient, he said, I don't really need the BAA this year. We can get along without passing one. We can move some other money around and take care of some of the agencies that otherwise, especially with the Medicaid intersection here with the federal government, we'd be okay without the BAA. So the Senate won't have to vote on it, I don't think, because I think the House will put the sustaining vote to it before then. But that does affect the local situation, because we still have at least one in the city and one in the town, or maybe it's more than that, the hotels that are taking part in this. So I'm not sure how you saw all of that, Mayor Doenges. I know the governor came up with an alternative plan, which to my knowledge was not accepted.
Yeah, it was interesting because I happened to get the opportunity to go down to Washington, D.C. and meet with our federal delegation through Vermont League of Cities and Towns and the National League of Cities Conference. And while I was down there, this was happening. The BAA discussions and conference committee were happening, and the governors sent in a staff member to talk about suggestions for the bill, and talked about specifically the suggestion of saying, hey, we're going to go from 1.8 to 2 point whatever it was and divvy up the money for municipalities to decide, but extending the program, extending the general assistance program beyond adverse weather is not good practice, because you're throwing good after bad, right? And I think that when I was on my trip back and I was headed back from the airport on Thursday, he called me and explained to me kind of what his plan was and why he wanted to go that direction. And it was very reasonable, right? He wasn't asking municipalities to take over running the hotel program. He wasn't saying, hey, you need to now go and establish, your own homeless shelters. The state's still helping with all of those things. It was we recognize that this has been a burden to your communities. We're trying to, make things a little bit better. We think by ending this program, people who are using the program that don't need to will go back to families and friends. And yes, there will be some people affected, but that's where you can step in and get them pointed in the right direction. And I thought it was a very reasonable approach. And I didn't necessarily disagree with it. I shared it with the Board of Aldermen that following Monday night, explained to them that may potentially be coming our way, but it sounds like now they've gone in a slightly different direction. So
yeah, I think it was sort of, people are very dug in on both sides of this issue. Those that want to continue with the hotel motel program, into June. And then I say, okay, well, when is it ever going to end? I mean, when is it absolutely, this is the drop dead date? Because I thought we had that last year when we agreed to take it through the winter months this year. And the agreement was that at that point it would end and other people would have to find other means. But just as the governor feels very strongly that it should end, and he's called it a failed program, and I don't think, I think he's right. Originally we had federal money that supported this. We had the whole COVID ARPA money and all that stuff, and it wasn't as much of a burden on the state. Rutland still felt it because, again, for whatever reason, we had hotel owners here that were available and wanted to participate in it. So we wound up with sort of an oversharing of the facilities here in Rutland County.
That's right.
But at some point, I that would be my question. Okay, even if we agreed that now it's June and hopefully nobody's going to be freezing on the streets in June, okay, then what's the next move? How can we help these folks get back on their feet and take responsibility for themselves? And I don't know where the solution is, but I don't think his plan of using the $2.1 million and then spreading it out in different cities that have been severely impacted has been accepted by the other group. So we'll have to see where that goes. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, Mayor. Is there anything else that we wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we talked about in D.C. with our federal delegation was, with so many changes going on in the administration, it's hard for states in especially small municipalities like Rutland to know what's coming and what's not. So I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, we were granted, or by the USDA, a little under 2 years ago, $1 million grant for urban forestry. So what that means is, all the trees you see around the city, they're planted by our foresters. And there's multiple reasons you want trees in a city. One is to keep the temperature down. Two is to keep it extends the longevity of the roads. It's better for the environment. There's a million different good reasons. The foresters could tell you better than me. But the idea being that we want to invest in that for the betterment of our city. That grant, we've been planning and working with USDA, but we haven't spent any of that money yet. There are 2 other grants like that in Vermont, and both of them have been pulled. The one in Rutland has not yet. So the communication with our federal delegation right now is so important to see what's happening, what's coming, how is it going to affect us? Because what we don't want to do is start spending that money and then not have a way to reimbursement. And we're seeing that actively happen now throughout the state, throughout the country. So that's the first thing. The second that we talked about, and this is technical, but it's tax-exempt municipal bonds. So this is something that's in front of our representatives and our senators in D.C. about taxing municipal bonds again, and that would actually increase the cost for municipalities like Rutland to do business. And tax-exempt municipal bonds have been around for years, and they have to be careful about that, and so do we. So we asked them to look at that. And then the last one is something that I'm pretty keen on here in Rutland, and I have been for a while. There's ways to bring private equity dollars to the city, and provide, when you build housing, sometimes you get tax credits, provide a tax break, and it's called an opportunity zone. And it's an IRS, it's in the IRS code, and it's a tax code. And what it does is it allows those with a tax burden in a year to take funds, invest them in an opportunity zone or an opportunity zone project, and then they get a stay on having to pay that capital gains tax. So a couple of years they don't have to pay the capital gains tax. And then they can pull that money back out. They still have to pay those taxes later on, but they were able to use those funds to develop, say, a housing installation or, a new plaza, or maybe they started a business, whatever that happens to be, and they did it without having to pay those capital gains tax. And then later on down the line, there's an additional tax benefit. these are programs that could very well easily be supported at a bipartisan level, because they would, in the absence of grants, allow private equity and private investment to come to Rutland and help us with things. So it's something that we talk about. It's very high level and technical right now, but if the current administration decides to double down on Opportunity Zone and Opportunity Zone investment, I think it's something that Rutland could capture and benefit from in the long run.
I did see Senator Welch a week ago Friday. He was at the Vermont State House. And, of course, he's well known there because he was there for a while. I think it was 14 years maybe.
Wow.
Maybe even longer. And so, he and I spoke very briefly. He remembered me from coming into the radio station years ago when he first ran for office. And it was kind of neat. He's always said hi to me, so I'll leave it at that.
He loves Rutland.
Yeah.
He cares about this community. He's good at being invested in the state.
And I think we both feel, and you and I probably both feel as the same way, Mayor, that there's nothing worse than uncertainty, and that's where we are right now. It seems as though weekly or even every other day something else happens that causes people great anguish, and it's kind of like Wall Street. The worst thing that can happen on Wall Street is uncertainty. If you don't know what's going to be happening, that's when the market goes down. Of course, that's a great opportunity to buy when it's down. But anyway, so I shared with him, my hope, and I did sign a resolution that urges the president to at least take a deep breath. This isn't the way we phrased it in the resolution, take a deep breath, but to just sort of hold back for a little bit and let things settle down and become a little clearer in terms of where we're going to wind up with, especially as it has to do with funding at the state level. So I don't know whether that'll make any difference or not, but I do share people's anxiety with what's going on. I wish that, again, especially now you take the tariff situation into account as well. That's an added sort of thing. So between kind of shutting down some of the government agencies and then making it more costly for the local folks to buy stuff, especially lumber. In our case, we send a whole bunch of wood up to Canada. They process it and then send it back down. And if there's a tariff, we're going to pay it.
We're going to pay it for our own lumber.
Yeah. So anyway, Okay. Well, we've reached the end of our program again today. I want to thank Rutland Mayor Mike Doenges for joining us, and we'll be back on a weekly, or not a weekly, but hopefully every 5 or 6 weeks we'll have you come in and give us an update. And it's always great to see you.
Good to see you too, Brian. Thanks for having me.
And we'll hopefully hear from all of you, and hopefully you'll join us again next Sunday here on Catamount Community Connection.